not just campus, NJCU community members, but of the broader community members. We wanted to be able to do something. So one of our community partners, Summer Dawn Reyes from In Full Color, came to me and asked about the opportunity to put something together. There were a number of BAFSO members who met as well, and they were talking about the need to do something. So we joined forces tonight, and we came together and we pulled this panel discussion together, and believe it or not, it happened in 1 week. So to get the response that we got in such a short period of time makes my heart glad. And I'm very, very grateful for each of you for taking the time to come tonight, because building community is so important as it relates to fighting oppression and ending all forms of oppression against all marginalized people. So I'd like to thank our partners. They will have a moment to speak in a little while. I'd like to introduce my colleague and friend in the community and member of Embrace Church, Summer Dawn Reyes, to please come and share with us about what tonight is going to look like.
Thank you so much, Benaida. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many people coming together in support of Black lives. So I am the founder and director of In Full Color. We're a Jersey City-based organization, and we empower women of color through education and the arts. So it was really important to me, to do this. I think most people know us as a platform that allows women of color to speak and to share their stories and their voice, but we're also committed to listening. And I wanted to bring together Black voices and amplify them today so that people of all colors can listen and understand and empathize with Black folks. And I hope today makes us all better advocates, and that our Black participants feel seen, heard, empowered, and connected. So I'm just going to go over what we are going to be enjoying today. So we are going to have a performance by poet Stephanie Dinsai, and then Dr. Will Guzman will be leading our panel. Very excited for that, and there will be a Q&A, so you guys will have an opportunity to share your thoughts. We're also going to have a performance by Jersey City Poet Laureate Rashad Wright, and another performance by Dr. Meridio Morin. And then we're going to close out with a community prayer. So this is going to be a really, really wonderful evening. So one thing that was important to us was having us be able to connect and see each other. So we wanted to use this Zoom format. But during the panel, we understand that it can be a little distracting if you just want to focus on our 4 panelists and our moderator, Dr. Guzman. One thing you can do is you can turn off your video if you are not a participant, and then you can actually hide all non-video participants, so you'll only see our panelists. We did it this way so that it could be a more open forum rather than the traditional webinar format where people can't really talk to each other. So if you go down to the bottom of your Zoom bar, you'll see it probably says unmute for you, a mic, right? And there's an arrow, and then stop video or start video and an arrow. So you're gonna click that arrow and you're gonna go to video settings, and then a window will pop up. You wanna go under the category where it says meetings, and you're gonna click hide non-video participants. So if you click that and you also turn off your video, if you're not participating in the panel, we'll be able to focus on our panelists. If you need help, you can type in the chat. The chat is an open space for everyone. And the Women's Center intern, Asia Good, shout out to her, and I will be monitoring the chat for your needs and any technical help. I'll pass it back to you, Benaida.
Thank you so much, Summer. So with your registration, when you received the Zoom link, you also received a host of resources. When the committee got together and the planning committee started thinking about what things were important that we shared tonight, we talked about things like sharing information about the census. You'll see that in your chat. Sharing information about voting and voting registration, and the links will be in the chat as well. In addition, we have ways that people can contribute to various organizations, local and national, that are doing the work of ending racism. So we did send that to you, in addition to a host of anti-racist resources, from books to links to all sorts of things. So we hope you receive that, because it is important to us that this event be dynamic, where you receive a lot of information. And then we want to continue the conversation. So this is not just, okay, we're only having this and it stops here. We know that we're only skimming the surface if we're talking about being together for a little over 90 minutes or so. But we wanted to start the conversation, provide you with all sorts of resources that hopefully you can use, so that you can, whatever your sphere of influence is, begin to make a difference if you aren't already. I know so many people are working hard to advocate, and people around the globe, people around the world, and we certainly know that our local community is as well. So really wanted to, with that in mind, just shout out all the people from all over that have come to join us. I know that people are here from all over the country, and there might even be people from outside the country. So it means the world to us that you took the time to come this evening. So again, you received a list of resources. Please make donations, and then, right, 26 ways to get involved beyond the streets, right? So we had that in our slideshow, and we sent that to you as well. So this event would not have been possible without the support of a host of different community partners. And I'd like to say thank you and acknowledge BASO, which is NJCU's Black Alumni Administrator, Faculty, Student, and Staff Organization. I'd like to shout out the officers, Vice President Dominique Smith, our Corresponding Secretary, Melissa Gutsmore, our Recording Secretary, Cynthia Waiters, and our Treasurer, Carla Denny Johnson. I'd also like to thank members of the Planning Committee, Gail Marquis, Tamara Cunningham, Sheila Curvin, who came together to help us with this event. I'd like to thank the Council on Hispanic Affairs, Embrace Church, certainly in full color, and the Spiker Rubin Women's Center for Equity and Diversity. So thank you all so much. Our partners will have an opportunity to share. So some are already shared, and I'd like to invite Dominique Smith to talk a little bit about an initiative that BASO was going to have for Juneteenth. We do have a meeting coming up on Thursday, but we wanted to preview it here. Dominique?
Yes, certainly. If we could just share our screen there so that they can see the flyer. As I shed light on the initiative. Thank you so much. As Vanita mentioned, my name is Dominique Smith. I am the Vice President of BAFSO and also the Director of the Ascend, the Interim Director of the Ascend Summer Bridge Program. So I'm very excited to share with you an opportunity to voice your feelings, essentially, to speak truth to power. We are collecting a video montage of words, of expressions from all of us here in honor of the Black Lives Matter movement and Juneteenth, which is swiftly approaching. We will be featuring it on Juneteenth in celebration of the progress that we have made and the plethora of work, of course, that clearly needs to be done, hence us having this event right now. The guidelines, as you can see listed there, the video essentially is going to be no more than 30 seconds. We want to be respectful, but we want to be, of course, expressive as we see fit there. We would love for you to represent in any fashion that you are comfortable. If you wish to wear the colors of the Black Liberation flag, you are more than welcome to do so. If you wish to represent in beautiful patterns and can take colors and whatnot, you are more than welcome to represent. But whatever your attire desired, we are opening the platform for you to share 30 seconds of expression, finishing the sentence, "In honor of Black Lives Matter and Juneteenth, I." And so you may go ahead and submit via the link that is going to be placed in the chat. The submission deadline is 11:59 p.m. sharp. We want to give our team plenty of time to edit and fuse the content together. Once again, the goal is for this to be ready for our Juneteenth celebration here at NJCU, so that we can all have a chance to express our truth and power.
Thank you so much, Dominique. And now we'd like to call on a representative for CHA, the Council on Hispanic Affairs.
Hi, everyone. Let me just get my notes here. Sorry. Okay. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Ellis Cruz. I am one of the preschool teachers at the university. I am a proud alum of New Jersey City University and the president for the Council on Hispanic Affairs. I would like to start by saying how outraged and saddened I am by the events happening in the world today. Though racism is not a new thing, it is becoming more and more public with technology and social media. On behalf of the Council on Hispanic Affairs, I would like to stress how much we value diversity. Our executive board alone come from diverse background of Latino countries and were raised in diverse cities. Although we may not understand fully what the Black community is or has gone through, we understand the pain and discomfort discrimination can cause. We support the Black Lives Matter movement, and we stand together against racism, discrimination, and police brutality. We are all part of one race, the human race, and we will continue to fight for equal rights. I would like to close with one of my favorite quotes. I am not Black, but I see you. I am not Black, but I hear you. I am not Black, but I mourn with you. I am not Black, but I will fight for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evilise. Thank you for the Council on Hispanic Affairs for partnering with us. I'd like to call on Elizabeth Zagata now to represent Embrace Church. Embrace stands for encouraging members to boldly receive all of Christ's embrace. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Venida. Yeah, my name is Elizabeth Zagata, and I'm a proud member of the Embrace Church family. Embrace Church was founded and pastored by our very own Reverend Venida Rodman Jenkins, and it's a community of faith that boldly affirms the Black Lives Matter movement. We resist the hatred and the violence perpetrated against Black bodies, and we continue to work towards change and undoing racism. We will continue to resist until all Black lives are visible, valued, and free. And I just want to thank Venida again and the team for pulling together this event in such a short amount of time. I'm really looking forward to a powerful and inspiring evening.
Thank you for being with us, Elizabeth. Summer?
Hi. Sorry. I'm going to introduce our performer. Yes.
You wanted to say a word about the video?
Oh, the video. Yes, I can do that right now. So I know some of us just joined, but I did give everyone instructions on how they could enjoy this event, especially during the performances and panel. So we chose this format, as I mentioned, so that we could be connected with each other, but we understand it could be distracting when you see everybody at once, when you just want to focus on the panelists. So you can actually hide everyone who doesn't have their video on. Sorry, let me say, so you could turn your video off if you are not participating, right? So if you are not a panelist or a performer, you can turn your video off. You go to the bottom of your toolbar and it'll say stop video. So you can just click on that. And there's an arrow to the right, so you can click video settings. And then a little window will pop up and you should be able to see your camera, right? And then you scroll down and under the subcategory meetings, you will see that the fourth option down says hide non-video participants. So just click on that, click the little checkbox next to it, and it'll turn blue. And then just X out of that window, and you'll notice that you don't see a bunch of people with their video off anymore. You'll just see the people with their video on. So I'm going to type that in the chat as well so that people can have some guidance on how to do that. So if you're not part of it, you could turn your video off, and that would be really helpful for us as well, so we can also see our wonderful, wonderful panelists. If you need help, myself and Asia can answer your questions in the chat, and we can also turn your video off. If your mic goes on or your video goes on and we turn you off, it's not personal, it's just for the flow of the event. And you will always be able to turn yourself back on if you wish. Yes, and Vinayda mentioned in the chat, so you can switch to speaker view. So if you go to the top right corner of your Zoom box, you will see that you can switch between speaker view and gallery view. If you just see me right now and then a bunch of little thumbnails on top of me, you are in speaker view. So you will see 9 squares, kind of tic-tac-toe Hollywood squares style. For gallery view, you can toggle that if you want to see everyone at once. That's really good during the panel. And then if you are in gallery view, the tile view, you can see that it now says speaker view. And then you can click that to let in, to see a performer. Okay. All right. Is there anything else, Vinayda?
No, I think we're ready for Stephanie.
Okay, so Stephanie is a wonderful alumna of In Full Color, but she's actually running a little late. So we have another amazing performer who was going to perform anyway, but we're flexible, like we adapt to stuff. Look at us doing stuff on the fly. So I actually want to introduce a friend of mine and Jersey City Poet Laureate, Rashad Wright. I'm gonna read your bio. So Rashad is the Poet Laureate of Jersey City. He is the first person to hold the title since 2004. He's also a graduate of New Jersey City University, receiving his BA in English Creative Writing. On campus, Wright was most known for his work with peers, educating peers as a certified peer educator. His poetry has been on local and national stages, and he is here today performing a wonderful piece for us called Happy Tree Poem. Take it away, Rashad Wright.
How's it going, everybody? I hope everyone can hear me clearly. I see a lot of professors, a lot of classmates, my mentors all in the room, so I'm honored to share this space with everyone from far and wide. And that means a lot to me right now. That's especially refreshing during these times. And during these times, I find myself in a place where I have a hard time communicating via my writing, just because I've been so busy to be as active as possible. And in that, I look to things I did in the past for guidance of my presence. And that's when I scraped up this poem that I wrote called Happy Tree Poem, which I wrote at NJCU for a class, submitted it and all that as if it was a regular assignment. And I still perform this poem to this day. So this is a message from 2017 Rashad to all of you and myself involved. I hope you all enjoy this, because I hope I can enjoy it as well, because this is what I need to hear. This is a Happy Tree Poem. It's inspired by Nikki Giovanni.
Rashad, I'm sorry. I know you're about to perform. You were going in and out, just to let you know. So right now you're good, but I want to make sure we all hear everything. So I just wanted to bring that out.
If I do go off or in, would you mind commenting it? Because I might not be able to see it or pick up. Okay. Thanks, Renata. Happy Tree Poem. Inspired by Nikki Giovanni. So like, a lowercase God shines down to me and says, why don't you write happy tree poems? And I didn't have an answer. I was simply too negligent of a poet, ignorant of my duties. How dare I not pay my tithes? Every poet has to write a happy tree poem. So this poem is me serving my time. This is my happy tree poem. But I needed to do some research first. So I put on my Black Magic hoodie. And the reason I call it Black Magic is because whenever I seem to wear it is the only time when people notice if I was to disappear right before their very eyes. And anytime people notice when us Black people start disappearing, there must be some sort of magic or trick involved. And then I'll put on my Jordans, but they're too tired and stabbed ragged, so I decided to rock my Michael Browns, which are really just hush puppies with the soul falling out. Now that I'm dressed, I'll stop at a bodega. I'll try to buy in Arizona, but I didn't have a dollar, didn't have a dream, just a quarter and a thought, so I buy a bag of Doritos. I like the way that the artificial cheese clings to my skin, forever reminding me of my everlasting state of crumbling, and then and only then will I have everything I need to find my happy tree. So I pull out my phone. I type up, happy tree. My GPS responds, nigga, this is Martin Luther King Boulevard. There ain't no happy trees around here. We got dead niggas, though. They in the Chinese food store, the laundromat, just about everywhere. Got dead niggas on sale. Buy one, get one free, half off even. I turn to my phone. I say, wow, Siri, that's not exactly what I was looking for, but thank you. I said to myself, this Anglo God didn't ask me to write a dead nigga poem, but a happy tree poem. Then again, if false God didn't want me to write dead nigga poems, why would he create so many of them? So regardless, I decided to embark on this journey. Guess where it took me? Branchbrook Park, Newark, New Jersey. And yes, there was a tree. It was green and happy, the same way President Burning Bush proclaimed. Upon further inspection, there was a dead nigga in that tree. And yes, he was happy, had happy slung around his neck with his roots, just out there dangling for everyone to see. A little blood on the bark to complement the green of the leaves. And what a travesty it would be for me not to write this poem. I mean, who else but the poet to write up nice eulogies for all of God's fruit, and who else but a nigga to be a God's fruit, all forbidden and shit, covered in the mark of Cain from head to toe. And we all know it takes a trigger happy ass Lord to just pluck one of us innocent niggas from whichever ghetto of branches he so desires. Why do you think us Black people tend not to live past 21? That is when we are at our most ripest. How dare I be all 25 and rotten when I had so much potential? I could have been so much. I could have made some poor tree out there happy. That's happy tree from. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yes, we did, Rashad. We enjoyed it. Very, very powerful. Thank you so much. We are grateful for you. We are so grateful that you are a part of our NJCU community, that you're a part of this family. Thank you. Very powerful. Whew. And look at the comments, please. Rashad, look at the chat, because the chat is on full blast right now. So it's my pleasure at this time to introduce someone who is very, very familiar to not just NJCU and not just the surrounding community, but to the nation. He's known throughout so many different spheres of influence, and we're proud to have him for this special event tonight. None other than Dr. Will Guzman, who is a professor of history at Prairie View A&M University in Texas. Prior to this appointment, he was our beloved Associate Professor of African and Africana Studies at NJCU and the director of the Lee Hagen Center. So I am so happy to welcome back Dr. Will Guzman, who will serve as our moderator, and then he will introduce the panelists for the evening. Let's give it up for Dr. Guzman.
Thank you, Vanida. Can you hear me well? Good. Brother Rashad, that was an amazing poem. Thank you so much for that. And also thank you, Vanida, and all the other leaders putting this this event together. Thank you for allowing me to be part of it. I'm gonna just introduce our four panelists, Brother Nevin Perkins, Dr. Mullin, Brother Lee, and Brother Rodman. And we'll go ahead and begin with Brother Lee. Isaiah Lee has dedicated his life to fighting for workers' rights. He was just 16 years old when he staged his first walkout in protest of teacher layoffs. The demonstrations got Isaiah a feature in Activism, the Ultimate Teen Guide. Today, Isaiah is a student at Howard University School of Law, where he not only is a second-year law student. Right before the meeting began, we were discussing the history, the rich history of Howard University Law School, led by Charles Hamilton Houston, who was an architect of the 1954 Brown versus Topeka, Kansas decision. He's not only participating in the protests in DC this past 2 weeks, but he's also a social justice observer or legal observer in order to assist protesters who are not only being arrested by the DC police, but also assisting in ensuring that the protests remain safe. Aaron Rodman. Aaron is a senior at Lehman College, right there in the Bronx, a part of the CUNY system, and will be graduating with his Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration with a concentration in marketing. While in school, he has participated in the Green Project and the Urban Tree. He lives in the Bronx, as mentioned, and enjoys listening to music, hiking, and nightlife. And right before we came on, he was mentioning that he's graduating in a few weeks, June 26th, and looks forward to moving back to New Jersey and getting out there in the workforce and hopefully finding some employment in his field. Dr. Mullin, Jennifer Mullin, is a writer, psychologist, coach, community organizer, spiritual practitioner. She works with people to create healing spaces within themselves, communities, and organizations. Her work is rooted in the idea that people's personal and collective healing are deeply intertwined with the process of decolonizing the self. She is currently working on creating a conscious range in a therapeutic range in retreat in the winter. She loves the ocean. She loves the PEP program, and PEP is a program there at NJCU. And she, of course, is part of Goddess Cat Isis and Real Ass Conversations. She performed her original poem, Rage and Ruins, in full color in 2018. Nevin Perkins began organizing about 4 years ago. Very active activists on the campus of NJCU as well as in Jersey City. One of the things that motivated him to become involved and engaged in activism was the unfortunate murder of his brother, who lost his life to senseless gun violence. Nevertheless, it was at that critical juncture in his life where he began to scrutinize this oppressive system that has tremendously impacted our people. He also helped establish Black Men United, which is a organization on the campus of New Jersey City University that has done not only tremendous work on the campus, but more importantly, is extremely active in the Jersey City community and bringing about attention to a variety of issues that's impacting the city. And so we'll go ahead and begin with the questions. The first is, of course, is just a real important question, is how are you all feeling at this particular moment, particularly of what has transpired over the last couple of weeks? And then just as a follow-up to that question, how would you describe the global uprising that has occurred since the senseless murder of Brother George Floyd? And so we could begin with anyone who wishes to jump in of the panelists.
I'll interject. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be here. Part of my tardiness as well as part of my voice. I'm actually just leaving the protest right now in Jersey City at City Hall. In terms of how I'm feeling pretty depressed, but motivated. You know, I'm angry. I'm feeling passionate. There's a lot of work to be done, and it's a long fight. Our ancestors have been fighting before us, and it's on us to continue that fight. And in terms of how I'm feeling about the uprisings, well, I think Malcolm articulated it best. In Minneapolis, the keg was sparked, and now we're seeing these uprisings all over the nation. So solidarity with our brothers and sisters and comrades in Minneapolis who inspired us to level up the fight all over the nation and to continue to be at the door of the oppressors as we fight for justice.
Excellent. Thank you for those comments. Anyone else?
I'll go. I'll be honest with you. When I first heard about the George Floyd news, I heard there was video of it, and I'll be honest, I didn't want to watch it because I knew it was going to take a part of my soul. And when I watched it, it really hurt me. That hurt me deep to see a man treated like an animal. And it was just a reminder that, you know, that there's still a fight going on and you can never forget it. And how would I describe the global uprising? I would say that it's about, excuse my language, about damn time. And we need to get into this and we need to figure it out. And we can't just sit back and relax and allow this to keep on going on, because it'll just keep going on if no one does anything. And that's how I feel.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else on the panel?
I would say, oh, did you want to go ahead there? Okay.
You can go ahead.
Thank you. For me, I feel like I'm riding a wave, like it's a constant ebb and flow between holding my own grief and the people that I serve and that I work with, and like intense rage. So it's sort of like remembering to eat, you know, remembering to make sure you walk outside safely, remembering to do normal human things. Sometimes the grief is so heavy, and I think that that's impacted by the historical trauma and the historical grief that Black folks have experienced plus years, as we know. So I think that in May alone, you know, with Ahmaud Arbery's murder and Breonna Taylor and then George Floyd and calling for his mother, you know, that is the level of dehumanization that Black folks have experienced throughout eons. And I think it is a time for many of us to take care of ourselves and to remember that this is heavy. and, you know, and as a psychologist, I have to say, I mean, we have to take care of ourselves too. So that's where I am. And how am I feeling about the uprising? I'm about it, you know, like I feel very similar to Aaron, like about time. And I think that this rage is healthy. This rage is sacred and holy. And the rage that the people are feeling is of the underbelly of the collective, of the shadow. And we need to be here right now.
You know, in terms of how I'm feeling, I would like to just echo what Dr. Mullin just brought up, which is, you know, 400 years and counting of oppression. And, you know, aside from being just angry, I think at this point I'm tired, you know, I'm tired of not being considered, you know, tired that poor Black folks are just kept out. We're left out of the Emergency Paid Leave Act as essential workers. You know, we're left out of the boardroom when it comes to making budgetary decisions for policing. You know, we're left out of the courtroom to effectively bring suit against police departments. And I think at this point, you know, as I am tired, I think most of the nation is just tired of not being a part of the decision-making, but are casualties of those decisions made by folks who are not invested in our communities. So I think being angry and being tired, as Dr. Mullin pointed out, in protest, it is holy and it's justified. And I'm excited to see where this leads to, because I feel change in the air, so.
Thank you for those comments. you know, Dr. Mullin raises an important question there about, or an important comment about it being more than 400 years. You know, as a historian, when I look at the dawn of the age of discovery, as many Europeans have termed it, you begin to see that the Portuguese begin to kidnap Africans off the west coast of Africa in 1441. And so when you look at from that standpoint to today, you have well over 579 years. And so when you tie that in with this global uprising, there's a reason why other cities throughout the world are drawing these connections to the hell that we're catching here in North America. And that connection, of course, is global white supremacy. How do we combat that? When you look at Black people in Australia and Black people in all other parts of the world protesting, they see that there's that common consistent denominator, which is not only police violence, state violence, but obviously institutionalized racism and white supremacy. With that being said, and anyone could jump in, the second question is, when we look at these tragedies, oftentimes the media focuses in on the particular victim at that moment, and in this case, obviously, it's Brother George Floyd. However, what gets overlooked, of course, are within the umbrella of Blackness, other marginalized Black groups get left out of the conversation. I think, of course, being here at Peer Review in Texas just a few years ago, with Sister Sandra Bland was, pulled over and ultimately lost her life due to a very over-policing police state, if you will. And so when we look at other groups, whether it be the LGBTQIA community, whether it be the trans community, whether it be Black immigrants, whether it be Black women, what are our thoughts about that? Why do these other groups get left out of the conversation? And how are they too being impacted within the overall Black community? Is there anyone that would like to jump in to discuss that erasure?
Well, I mean, I can tell you as an openly gay Black man, unfortunately in the movement, sometimes people want our strategy, but they don't want our presence. You know, folks like to forget about Bayard Rustin, who was instrumental in helping organize and was the right-hand man of Martin Luther King. But a committee was formed to push him to the back. And the same happens. In fact, you know, this is Pride Month. And in attending one of the DC protests, I was dressed in a way to express my pride, and I was with my partner. And it was ironic because as the entire city was shouting Black Lives Matter, we were both called the F word twice on our way to the protest. I've also seen videos of trans women who have been beaten in Minneapolis. In fact, one of the incidents happened on June 1st. And people like to, the argument that I've heard is prioritize their race. You're Black before you're gay, or you're Black before you're trans, as if it's a choice. Last time I checked, I'm gay and Black simultaneously. And it's important to recognize that LGBTQA folks show up for everybody. We show up for Black folks. Cisgendered, straight, we show up for y'all. We organize, we make our voices heard, and we have your back. And so we expect the reciprocity. And I think you can't, the hypocrisy of saying Black Lives Matter, but not recognizing that there are Black folks that are not like you, that may not be of the same religious affiliation, the same gender, the same sexual orientation, or non-binary. The reality is we all should be in this together, and we shouldn't be adapting to a white colonial kind of format and how we divide up our community or create a status quo for our community. We're different, and that's what makes us special, and we should stick with
that. Anyone else on the panel?
Yeah, I will jump in and say, I also think that it's important to look at in addition to what Isaiah mentioned, also gender, how often the Black female body is sort of reduced or overlooked or personified as some quote unquote hoe or somebody that should not be respected. I think that when a lot of people were looking at George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery, and as they should, but Breonna Taylor was also left out of the conversation in many ways initially. I think now we're pushing forward, but I think that this continues to happen. And I also want to highlight you know, poverty and socioeconomic status and class, that this continues to also happen. We look at New Jersey, right, like our racial wealth gap was designed in slavery and reinforced by a housing system that includes redlining and discrimination. So this is like a very racialized system of wealth. And this also means like lack of opportunity for working class Black folks and lack of financial security. And also all of this is happening in the midst of a public health crisis. Not only is this devastating, but it is also really, just what I want to use, depressing for many Black folks, you know, feeling, it's a feeling of gaslighting, you know, feeling like, wait, you're blaming me that I should be working harder, I should be working smarter, when in fact I'm doing everything I need to do when the system is designed to continue to hold us down. So, yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, if I could interject, I mean, it's all of us or it's none of us, you know what I mean? And folks who have the visibility in terms of the fight, it's on them to make sure that folks who don't have the visibility are seen and are heard. So the folks that are fighting for George Floyd need to be fighting for Tony McDade, need to be fighting for Breonna Taylor, and we need to continue to make sure that the most marginalized in our community are being amplified. Oftentimes we ask our allies to just sit back and to just listen to us, but when it comes to intra-community situations, we tend to speak for these folks. We need to let these folks speak for themselves, and we need to be there in solidarity with the entire community and just amplify their voices. I think oftentimes people fail to realize that individuals have the ability to articulate their own circumstances of oppression, and sometimes we speak for those people. So as Black people who are maybe less marginalized than other Black folks, we need to take a step back and we need to listen more.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that. You know, Dr. Mullin, you mentioned something that made me think. Just earlier this week, I was listening to William Darity, the brother out of Duke University, and he was talking about this wealth gap that you referenced. And one of the statistics that he cited was quite striking, in that he said that when you look at a Black person in this country who's educated, a 4-year degree, and look at the income that they earn, that it's half, usually close to half of the income of a white person who is not a high school graduate. And so I think that speaks to this kind of wide gap that many people overlook, and how that influences, you know, the lived experiences that we have in this society, including, you know, the comments that Brother Nevin indicated, as well as Isaiah. You know, all of these issues are intertwined with each other. And so having said that, I'll just transition to this third question, which is, what should be some of the solutions, in your opinion? And this goes for anyone on the panel. How do we resolve some of these issues? What should be some of our goals and demands?
I can speak on that simply for the fact that I was just at a protest articulating our demands right now. So in terms of the police brutality situation that we're facing, Ida B. Wells, who was an anti-racism strategist, said that the people who commit murders investigate themselves. So we need the people to understand that police don't have the capacity or the moral compass to investigate themselves in situations. So all cities across the state and across the nation should be working to implement citizens review boards so that people can be in place and have the power to make sure that police are held accountable in situations like that. Another thing that folks should be working towards is defunding the police. And I'll be fully transparent in stating that I am a police and prison abolitionist, but we don't get there overnight, right? It's about the day to day. So one thing we're advocating for is a 25% decrease in the police budget in Jersey City. The police budget right now is $170 million, and a 25% decrease would be $42 million. Now we're advocating for that money to be pushed towards civil service programs and community engagement, because what we fail to realize leaning on law enforcement is that the safest neighborhoods don't have more police, they have more resources. So if we double down on those resources, then we can double down on defeating crime. We've got to stray away from reactionary solutions and get to proactive organizing. So those are some of the steps that we're trying to implement here. And it's good I've been going to protests all over the state, and I've been hearing citizens or civilian review board. I've been hearing intra-community policing, neighborhood watch programs. People need to, start being more accountable for themselves and stop leaning on oppressive systems to bring us justice when they were never designed to.
Excellent, excellent. Anyone else?
I think a great point that was brought up was about, the socioeconomic kind of class issue that is usually the elephant in the room, right? We talk about white flight, but we don't talk about black flight. And there's a huge disconnect right now between the exceptional few that make it out of oppressive conditions, whether it be through housing, education, and job opportunities. You have those folks who may want to preserve the respectability politics that we've been told for decades, that you just work within the system and you try to get what you can. But the problem is that what's happening now is where there's a lot of talent for those Black folks that have benefited from opportunities, whether it be through work or education, that are not in the communities that are most vulnerable. And so one of the things, not just one, but three of the things that I've often advocated for is making sure that there's proximity, right? So physical proximity to these spaces where we are being policed, where our children are not getting the adequate education that they deserve, where we are living in food deserts. We have to be near those places, because in advocating for ourselves, have an interest in moving us forward, but in preserving the status quo. So, the Urban Institute put out some great data about, kind of what was the situation of students by school districts throughout the country. And they, assessed, who was without Wi-Fi and who was without computers. I can, talk about New Haven, where I'm from, 17% of students didn't even have Wi-Fi. 29% of students in New Haven live in poverty. They even were tracking, who are in, what students are in crowded spaces. I mean, that's the kind of work that we have to be able to do, so that when we're presented with contrary information, we have our own data to back it up, and we have our own information to back it up. And then the last thing for me is taking that accountability. So we're proximate, we're taking inventory, but most importantly, are we holding ourselves accountable using our own resources? And I mean as Black and brown folks. If you have the money or you have the education, are you making sure that you are an active and engaged member in these neighborhoods that are most vulnerable? And so what I'm seeing now is on LinkedIn, Facebook, to me, I'm at a place where I don't try to negotiate with folks who are committed to misunderstanding me. But there's a lot of opportunity with my people. And so when we come together, I want to make sure we're holding each other accountable for being okay, well, what are we doing? How are we getting the money in? How are we running for office? And how are we organizing to support folks running for office? Because I want to make sure that we're in those positions of power to make those strategic decisions that we had discussed earlier, whether it be the budgetary decisions, defunding the police, and so much more.
Excellent. Those are three concrete things that we could immediately do. Very good. Anyone else on the panel would like to chime in?
I just want to say quickly, as I would be remiss as a mental health professional if I did not highlight mental health. And I think that that is one of the ways that we can shift our reform. We need less cops, right? I'm also an abolitionist. We need less cops and more mental health first responders. So what would happen in this world when mental health experts are the first on the scene and not police officers, right? We would see a decrease in violence. We would see more community transactions, circles, bringing us back more to our indigenous and grounded roots. And I think that that is part of where this is going too, is thinking about the well-being of individuals. So often when Black identified individuals are being accosted by the police, the first thing that is happening is a sense of panic in their bodies, right? So they're already not struggling with mental health issues. I mean, I know when a cop rolls by or I'm getting pulled over for something, immediate pouring of sweat, I might feel paralyzed and this fight or flight or freeze response. You know, it's a really scary response. And with everything that is happening in this world right now, it's quite understandable. So at this point, I think that most Black Americans are struggling with some form of emotional health and wellness dis-ease, dis-ease, not disease, because this is an extremely violent time for us. So if we can spend more money on that, as well as decriminalizing our schools and decriminalizing our communities, right? So everybody said that, but I wanted to just put it back out there. We need to remove some of the security guards and cops from around our school systems and allow our babies and our youth to feel safe and know that they are safe inherently and deeply loved by the community in which they live.
Excellent, excellent. And so hearing these various examples of some of the things that we could do, how would that look like in a sense of actualizing those examples? In other words, how do acts of resistance look like at this moment? What types of acts of resistance should we be engaged in? Over the last 2 weeks, you know, many members of the media and folks from who perceive themselves to be educated and middle class and upper class have been very critical of demonstrators who are engaging in destroying property and engaging in acts of violence. However, no one really is proposing an alternative, you know, solution. In other words, yes, we could engage in protests, but what other acts of resistance can we engage in?
If I may, I think, and protesting is great, but protesting also comes from a space of reactionary activism. And I spoke on how there needs to be a shift to proactive organizing. So if we're looking to put pressure on the oppressor, one thing that we can focus on is economics. So we can have a potential blackout where folks actually keep the wealth within the community. The Black dollar is the dollar that leaves the community of its owner the quickest. So if we could slow down that pace in terms of the money that we're giving to the oppressors, that's a great first step. And I also just wanted to take not an off topic, but just a slight second to talk about these demonstrations that are happening. And some of them are quote unquote escalating, and some of them are being condemned for those escalations. No one in the world has the ability to tell Black people how to resist their oppression. And when you see violence for so long, when violence plagues your community by the oppressor, sooner or later, you're going to emulate that violence. So here in Jersey City, we have worked tirelessly to keep the peace at our protests and to make sure that they don't escalate. But that isn't because we're in opposition with our comrades who are escalating across the nation. That's because we're trying to foster community building and reconciliation with law enforcement so that we can have mutual respect. I think that needs to be developed among the community between law enforcement and the people, because right now we don't have respect from the establishment. Once we get accountability and control over our communities, then we could stop begging for these things and demand these things that we're asking for.
And I would just like to kind of piggyback on that, because there was a great point in there about the Black dollar, right? And so, you know, one of the things in the work that I've cared so much about is in workers' rights. And we'll see businesses and Newark is a perfect example, you know, all of these large corporations that sit in these geographic areas that are predominantly Black, predominantly Latino, but you don't see the makeup of those businesses reflect that demographic. And I would even go as far as to call out nonprofits as well for not having leadership that reflects the demographics in which they're trying to help. And so I think there needs to be some demands about having a standard that says, hey, if you're going to be here, your workforce needs to look like the area you're in. You know, if you're a nonprofit, there are tax incentives that you have. If you're a for-profit business, you're making money off of the Black dollar that was mentioned. And so we have to first get the jobs, right? What is disheartening to me is that employers use a narrative of there's no talent, we don't have the applicants, they're not applying. When I said before about taking inventory, there needs to be that accountability of, okay, we want to make sure we understand the numbers on who's applying and who's being accepted. And then also, in terms of reparations, are you providing pipelines to train people to come into these spaces? You know, if you're a company that's looking for software engineers, there should be classes that are teaching high schoolers to program or to code, and they should be able to come into your business. If these are health insurance companies, marketing firms, regardless of what the trade is, there should be a pathway for the students who are in that area to get into those jobs, not only gain that knowledge, but to develop that wealth that's needed in that area. You know, we have these, you know, Hartford to Newark to Manhattan. It's like, I don't understand how businesses can operate in proximity to Black folks and don't hire Black folks.
And I would just want to piggyback off of that. Living in the Bronx, the one thing I have noticed with the police officers is that there aren't a lot of police officers that look like us, you know, and that's a big thing, is comfort. When you are around law enforcement, many of the times they don't look like you, and that will make you uncomfortable from the beginning. But like when you have Black law enforcement that is a part of the community and that has lived in the community and understands what's going on in the community, you know, it bridges a gap that some law enforcement from the suburbs wouldn't be able to understand, you know, because there are a lot of times me working at Duncan part-time, I'll see about 9 or 10 white officers and maybe 1 Black officer. And I'm looking around and I'm like, this is the Bronx. There's a huge Hispanic population. There's a huge Black population, you know, and there's even a good amount of Irish and Asians, and I just don't see anything. I don't see any representation. And I'm like, there has to be people of color applying to get into these precincts. And I'm wondering, where is that going? Where are all the Black officers going? Where is that leading to? Where are the people that look like us policing us? Because when people look like us and policing us, they tend to understand us better, you know, and that's just one big thing that I think that could easily have a huge impact on the community. And it will definitely change the negative connotation with the police officers too, you know.
Yeah, you should be required as an officer to live exactly the area that you police. Wherever the most activity is, you should have to live there. So you want to, you know, constantly on MLK Boulevard, you like to survey that area, you got to live on MLK Boulevard. And there should be, you know, a high bar to determine whether you actually live at that address. And so, no, it shouldn't be, I mean, that's the same issue with a lot of the employers, right? From the people who are working at the businesses in our neighborhoods to the people who are teaching in our schools, driving an hour from out of town to come in, you know, and the same goes for police. If you want to police, you live where you police. And I'm sure attitudes will change, or you'll start to see a shift in the makeup of these police precincts. And I think that's equally as important. And it really shouldn't be policing. It should be, you know, a community-based public safety effort. So I was educated on what the defund police narrative was and what it really means. And when I really thought about it, as it stands, police departments weren't created to, you know, maintain civility. They were created to chase after slaves and to protect the political interests of wealthy business owners. They've never been established to curtail robbery or violent crimes against us. They're usually to protect the wealthy. And so that's why I think the public safety efforts, should be from people who are from those places that have a vested interest in protecting people and curtailing trauma that we experience. Mm-hmm.
All excellent points. As a matter of fact, I'm going to deviate from the list of questions that I have here, and I want to just give a follow-up question to this point, because as we even look at Brother George Floyd and his murder, 2 of those 4 cops were non-white. And when you look at other uprisings over the past 20 or 30 years, I think of immediately the white Cuban officers that killed Black men in Miami in 1980 and 82 and 89. I think of other non-white officers who have contributed to the deaths of African Americans. And so how would that look like? In other words, what is the argument that we should have prepared for our community to encourage, our little young Black girls and little young Black boys, for them to go into law enforcement? What is the argument for that? Because if it's going to be a continuation of Black men and women being murdered at the hands of the police because of over-policing, because of use of force guidelines, because of range of other issues, including abuse of power, what would be the argument?
I mean, I would say that independent enforcement efforts is important. I wouldn't advocate for kids to go into a system that is rotten to the core. I would say if you can't defund police departments, then we'll fund our own public safety. And if we have to give licenses and provide training that is adequate and causes no harm to the folks who live in these neighborhoods, then let's do that. Because it seems to be what municipalities respond to, right? We saw that with the Black Panthers. They have been vilified as a terrorist organization, which is completely untrue and historically inaccurate, but it isn't effective. I mean, people have the right to bear arms. It is your constitutional right, and Black folks should exercise that. And I think there needs to be people who, have the training and have the adequate state of mind to form programs that bring folks who are interested in law enforcement into a program that's really interested in protecting all of its residents and not just brutalizing and abusing the community at large. So it may turn up some eyebrows and it may intimidate the neighboring communities, but that's okay.
Excellent. So anyone else want to chime in? Go ahead, Dr. Mullin.
Sure. Okay. I was going to say that I think that I read an article the other day, and somebody was asking the question, what are the alternatives to policing? And I might be butchering this, but they said something akin to like, what are the alternatives then to capitalism? It's like asking the same thing, that this is like a really, really convoluted and connected topic. And as we know by definition, policing is like the regulation and control of a community. It's in my humble opinion, to maintain like the capitalist social order. Right. And for me, the complete abolition of the police system would require this change in social order. And some of the alternatives is to empower the people to keep their community safe, as a lot of people have already been saying on this panel. But I think that we would be remiss if we did not identify restorative justice as a major point here. And it's an example to the police. It has a long history in Canada, a long history with our Indigenous and First Nation populations. And I think it's important to look at reconciliation instead of punishment. And that is not something that we do so well here. We think like, oh my goodness, if the police is gonna be gone, then what's gonna happen to rapists and robbers and this and that? And as we know, there is a massive decrease right, in those kind of violent or non-violent and criminal behaviors when we give more money into our communities. So the beauty of restorative justice is that there is like a collective body of citizens that have the ability, very deliberately, to determine whether or not the offender, you know, has such and such consequence or not. You know, and I think that it also allows for more of a sense of peacekeeping, of community accountability, and a sense of actually taking ownership for our responsibilities. It involves the victims, it involves their families, and it involves a sense of taking into account mental health as well as, you know, the criminal justice system. Yeah.
And I would even say this for the police force and, you know, trying to get, you know, our younger people into it or see it in a different limelight is, you know, I'd preach that we can change it from the inside out, you know, even though there are systems put in place and laws put in place to systematically oppress, you know, Black people. Sometimes you have to get into the system in order to break down the system. So, you know, I definitely agree with the fact that you could tell a young kid that, you know, you can become that police officer that changes everything in that precinct. You know, you could become the police officer of change. You know, you could stop this, you know, stuff like that. You know, there's different ways, and I definitely think that is one of the ways. You know, I don't necessarily see the police force going away anytime soon. So I do believe that we can get our young people to start getting involved in it, and, you know, they could be the change, the next generation of policing. You know, they'll understand how it is to police. They'll understand what it's like to be, you know, to be a police officer and do the right thing and not watch somebody be murdered, you know, to take a stand, to be different, not be a part of a gang mentality, you know, things like that in those nature.
Excellent comments, Aaron. Thank you for that. You know, us, you know, not engaging in, to use your words, that gang mentality is going to be critical. When we see a lot of officers stand to the side and watch their superiors or their supervisor or another officer engage in these criminal acts, one wonders, well, why didn't they speak up? And of course, there's a range of different answers for that, but nevertheless, the question begs an answer. And that leads me to this next question about, you know, white folks. In other words, what is their role? This past week, I've heard from different white leaders basically changing their views that they have had over the past few years. For example, I heard Drew Brees, the quarterback of New Orleans, you know, indicate that, you know, he was tired of seeing the flag being disrespected and feeling that the military was being disrespected. And then I heard the commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell, basically indicate the same thing, that now he supports Black Lives Matters and that he wanted to apologize for NFL players in the past who had kneeled. For both of those individuals, I believe that they're a microcosm of so many whites in this country who did not need this incident for them to have a change of heart. That these issues have been going on since 1619 in this country. And so I say all that to say simply, what is the role of whites as we begin to attempt to build this movement, including assisting Black Lives Matters as an organization? What is the role of whites?
I can speak to that. No,
I just
go ahead. You
yeah.
go ahead, brother.
I was gonna say, I just want to point out one thing. You know, my mom said it perfectly. Us Black people, this educational system, we've had to basically get our masters in whiteness in order to succeed in this society that's been put in place. But, you know, white people haven't even given a Google to what goes on with Black people. And I would just say, for not all, I do not want to generalize, but I would just say that, you know, if we have to learn about your culture, you know, I would expect that you would give us the benefit of the doubt to learn about our culture. And, you know, to understand that this country was successful because of slaves. That's why this country became what it was. You know, a lot of colleges were built by slaves, you know, different things like that. And I would say, just say, for the white people, I would say, lock arms with us, join us. Do not forget, we are in this together. We're humans, you know. At the end of the day, we bleed just like you. You know, we are all in this together, you know. And I would say, speak up, because I know that sometimes white people, when they're in only a white setting, they tend to speak their mind, and some people tend to allow certain things to go. But it's time to stop that and say something and make them uncomfortable for those people. Make people uncomfortable to say anything. Don't make people feel like, oh, I'm with white people, I can say whatever I want. You know, make them uncomfortable so that they always question exactly what they're going to say with whoever they're with. And they don't feel like, you know, it's okay to say it in this group, you know. That's what I would say to that. And, you know, we're in this together. I think that's the biggest thing. Do not forget, you know, we are in this together, and we need to be in this together because we need your help. Everyone needs your help. We can't get this done without you. And, you know, and that's what a big thing for me.
Brother Nevin?
Agreed, brother. I think the brother had an excellent sentiment, especially about political and revolutionary education, because we've been taught from a white supremacist Eurocentric narrative. We had to learn about Thomas Jefferson, who declared that we were all equal, but owned 609 slaves in his prime. We had to learn about Patrick Henry. We had to learn about Benjamin Franklin. But also, on the flip side, we didn't have to, but we chose to read Malcolm. We chose to read Asada. We chose to read Angela Davis. We chose to read Conway Newcomer. We chose to read Thomas St. Cora. So white folks need to politically educate themselves about our history and our culture. And for the allies who are sincere and considerate and actually wish to help in the fight, because let's be clear about what's happening right now with the movement, because it comes in waves. This should be very familiar to people. We were screaming, "I can't breathe" a few years ago when Eric Gardner was killed. So understand, with the hyper intensification of the media, there'll be people that'll care for a second, and then once the media stops covering our deaths in the hyper scrutinized fashion, they'll stop caring. So we have to be conscientious of that and weed those folks out as they stop caring when the distractions come back, when we're allowed to go back outside, when we're allowed to watch sports. You know, it'll be, oh, I can't attend the protest, I have to watch the Lakers game. So we have to understand those things too. But in terms of allies, I think the greatest thing that an ally can do is to not try and reinvent the wheel. You know, we have to amplify the voices of the people that are already on the ground doing the work. I think that is essential. Oftentimes, people put themselves in positions of leaderships in fights that aren't theirs. You know, you shouldn't be holding a Black Lives Matter protest if you aren't Black. You should have Black lead organizers in your movement, and they should be the vocal point, and you should be there standing in solidarity behind, not in front, not next to, behind. We have to amplify the voices of the people that are already doing the work, whether that's with resources or whether that's with our bodies. I held a protest in Jersey City a few weeks ago where we marched to the South District, and when we got there, I told the allies to stand in between the Black people and the oppressors, that be the police, so that if you were serious about standing in solidarity, you would put your body on the line, like how we put our bodies on the line every day by just leaving our house. So these are the things that we have to ask of our allies. You know, if you're standing in solidarity with us, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't seek to be optical. Don't seek to put yourself in a position of leadership. Listen to us. We know how to articulate the systems of our oppression best. So understand what we're doing and plug in.
Yeah. I just want to add on an interpersonal level. I agree with everything, a lot of what Nevin and Brother Aaron was saying. And interpersonally, you know, to get very concrete about things, I would also say for white folks to not be afraid of being wrong, right? To be okay with not knowing, as one of the manifestations of internalized white supremacy, right, is like competitiveness, perfectionism, you know, and again, not that other people of color do not have these, but a lot of our responses are learned, right, and from witnessing and watching a more individualistic perspective and an individualistic way of doing things, which is AKA more Eurocentric. So it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to sometimes be quiet. The same way with my light skin privilege, I shut up sometimes and I have to back up and make sure, how much space am I taking up and being conscious of that. So I think it's important to know your point of privileges, know where you're at, and to be okay with not always knowing. I'm with that. Black folks are not required to educate you. And if any Black folks do or decide to, beautiful, right? Maybe you have a great relationship with them, but as Isaiah had said, we are tired, so tired. And part of that exhaustion is also tending to the egos and the needs of some of our white friends or allies. And not that we may not love or care about y'all, but there's also a place of just like, this is exhausting, like do your own reading as well, which leads to my next point, which is, do your own research. As has already been said, continue to educate yourself, continue to understand policy, know where your lane is, know what you're really strong at, right? If your thing is art, plant medicine, spiritual healing techniques, we need it all in the revolution, right? If we're really gonna be about it, we need to be about it. And I think it is time that whiteness as a structure begins to take some steps back and listens, like take deep listening breaths to who has been here and the ways that we have colonized people and the ways that we have enacted violence and the way we continue to on a daily basis. And lastly, redistribute that income. If you got it, give it. Like if you have that money, if you're sitting on a lot of money, there's a lot of folks out there that are in need. There's great causes, there's individuals. So these are just some of the many ways that I think that allies could be less performative and more really present with the work that they say they want to do.
And I just want to say real quickly, there's no more excuses. Everyone has a smartphone. It takes 2 seconds to look up something. That's the biggest thing now with technology. There's no more excuses. Why do I have to educate you when there's a phone in your hand that has more information than I'll ever have? And I think that's a big thing that people it's ignorance, I think. If you choose to be ignorant, then you choose to be ignorant, but there's no more excuses anymore. Technology is there. There's libraries. Everyone has a phone. It takes 2 seconds to pull out your phone and try to figure out what's going on. Like somebody just said, ask Dr. Google. Exactly. Thank you. And I just want to leave it at that.
And I would also say, particularly for the Northeast, being performative, that was an amazing point. I have to keep that in the back of my head because I think I've been looking for that language for a long time. Be honest with yourselves. Just because you're a Democrat, just because you're liberal, you can talk all the talk you want. You have to be honest with yourself. There is a lot of growth that's happening for Blacks in the South today, but we're seeing a lot of the wealth gap occurring in the Northeast. And so white folks have to get honest with the fact that you don't want your kids going to that predominantly Black public school. You got to get honest with the fact that you ain't trying to have your property values go down. You got to get honest with the fact that when you are in any position to give a loan, that if you want to give a higher interest rate loan to somebody who's of color, you have to check yourself on that. So for the executives, for the teachers, for anyone in leadership, whether it be public sector or private sector, you got to really think about what it is that you benefit from and whether you're okay with leveraging that or giving that up. Because we can't keep having this, circle of a conversation when we talk about like Black folks not educating you. I'm of the Black folks have to be educated on everybody. Minorities have to be educated on how the dominant group moves so that we can protect ourselves. I've only ever seen the most privileged of our communities have the exception of stupidity. Do not sit up here with Google at your exposure and just, if we just think about reason, just logic, use your brain. I'm not going to sit here and go in circles with you while you're committed to manipulating me about an issue that you very well understand. The N-word is not the only thing that hurts me. In fact, I may want to deal with somebody. You can call me the N-word if you give me a low interest loan, a quality education, good grocery stores, and a decent home to live in. You can say it all day and all night. But until that happens, I'm not going to sit here and have this conversation about what folks on the with the conservative party, with Republicans down south, over in that other place, what they're doing in terms of rhetoric. Rhetoric isn't beating my behind in the street. Rhetoric isn't starving me, and rhetoric isn't keeping me uneducated intentionally. So we have to start having that really tough conversation in the Northeast, because especially in the New York, New Jersey area, because again, it's like, don't just give me that good talk. Let's get down to action and start thinking about how you can really play a role in giving up some of that privilege.
Guzman, I'm sorry. We have to transition to the Q&A. This is fabulous. Thank you, beautiful people. But back in your hands, Dr. Guzman. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. You read my mind. I was just about to ask Venida how we doing on time. And so we're going to look for Ms. Summer. She's going to read off some questions to us. And as she reads questions, anyone on the panel could speak unless the question is targeted to a specific person on the panel. Summer?
Hi. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We got so many rich, wonderful ones, but obviously in the interest of time, we're not going to be able to get to all of them. So I'm just going to ask a few of them that really jumped out at me. So the first is from Gloria Bozeman. She said, I am concerned that as we move to address this tragedy, we will forget the full focus of the inequities, including the disparity in healthcare and the disproportionate loss of lives due to the COVID pandemic. How do we get to the full conversations of equity?
Anyone on the panel want to tackle that? Well,
I mean, beyond, no, you can go. Sorry.
I was gonna. Oh, sorry.
Anybody want to go?
I was gonna ask, is it only the questions are only available to panelists, or is anyone in the room able to answer or give help to answer the question?
Yes. Who's that speaking?
Oh, my name is Coy Nivens. I'm a psychology student at NJCU. And an African American Studies minor. Venida knows me very, very well. Most people that have went to the sit down with the president of NJCU may also know me. I spoke out against her. She was a little rude. But I just wanted to know if there was any, if anyone else could field in an answer.
Yes, please, Coy. If you have some comments regarding that specific question, please, the floor is yours.
Hey, Venida. It just kind of, it's a great question. I think that was a really awesome question. My thing was, I think we all have to get real about getting real. I think we have to have an honest, open education where people, for example, like she said about the disparities in the healthcare system, if people really knew how the School of Gynecology came about and what that was based on, and if they knew where all this medicine or cures came from, if they really knew how we found out about syphilis, how we found out about gonorrhea, how we found out about chlamydia, if they really knew how AIDS was discovered and it wasn't just this, over phalangeed version of a story to make everyone feel comfortable, we could really understand that the disparities of how Black bodies are treated is a history. This is something that America has always disregarded the Black body, has never seen to take care of it, has never seen to give it what it ever needed. So when it comes down to the healthcare system, we in the Black community, or those of us that are of the community of color, have to know that we cannot rely on the one pharmaceutical system that we know for fact kills our people every day with overly prescribing them with medicine, not giving them the actual care that they need when they're in hospital. So many Black women die giving birth because they're not believed to go through what they're going through and the doctors don't help them. So even an example of what's going on with Black bodies in the COVID pandemic, dying at an alarming rate compared to everyone else. There's so many other health compromises to the Black community, whether it be diet, whether it be food, whether it be whatever it may be, that put us at a disadvantage on top of the economic situation, on top of not being able to get to accessible healthcare or healthcare that is adequate, for what we may need. We have to have a real conversation, either that, or we have to become more dependent on each other and our doctors, our people, like Black doctors, Black physicians, Black pharmacists. We have to go to our people that we know how to operate within the code of ethics, know how to operate by HIPAA, and at the end of the day, go by the oath that they will do no harm. A lot of these doctors that are operating are doing more harm than good, and nobody's really talking about it because, oh, it's my doctor, I trust my doctor. And Black people are so wound up in trusting the white man with whatever they say because we would rather trust them than our own. We believe that they know what they're telling us is right for our bodies, and we know we don't need that water pill medication. We know we don't need that. We just need to eat healthier. We need to go to holistic methods, but we won't do it. We believe what the white man says. So we have to change our narrative of what we accept as this person knows what's healthy for my body. And Black people have to get comfortable with knowing that the lifestyle that we live, whether it be comfortable, whether it be traditional, no matter where it may be, is not healthy for us. So we have to be conscious, overall health conscious of what's going on before we expect anyone else to care about what's going on. Because a lot of doctors will say, well, you know, you need to lose weight, you know, you need to stop doing this, that, and the third. And then there'll be narratives of, well, Black people love fried chicken, Black people love this, Black people love that. So it's so many conflicting rhetorics that the only way to get to the deep down of it is a lot of people that have made millions and millions of dollars from quote unquote treating the Black body have to come out of those pockets and say, you know what? I really didn't know what I was practicing, or I didn't see it. And even what we talked about already, accountability, there has to be accountability. There has to be doctors that are saying that doctor's unethical, that doctor's not doing what they're supposed to do. Somebody has to be willing to sacrifice their reputation for the life of another person that at the end of the day is what they're supposed to protect and care for. So that was just my thought.
Thank you for that, Coy. That's some excellent comments. Two things come to mind. You mentioned early on in the conversation about, you know, where did, you know, the field of gynecology was born out of. And of course, there's an excellent book by Deidre Cooper Owens called Medical Bondage that looks at that history. And of course, the answer is the Black woman. Another book, of course, is by Harriet Washington.
Medical apartheid.
Or medical apartheid, exactly. And so for many of these white doctors that you reference, these books will become critical for them to, you know, become aware of that history. Summer, what's the next question?
Hi, that was such an interesting question. So this next one, I was intrigued by this attendee's many questions, but I thought this one is directly relevant to something that's going to happen later this year. Cesar Sanchez says, do you think that voting for Joe Biden, knowing his racist and awful past records, would bring radical reform such as defunding police or any sort of reform?
I personally don't think it's ever, I mean, will I personally vote for Joe Biden? Yes, I don't have a choice. Democrats put me in a position where I have no choice. But I don't think it's ever right to vote from a position of weakness. To choose somebody who's the better of two evils just because we think he's electable, I think is a disgrace. And I think that what I had said before about holding ourselves accountable and making sure that we're in leadership, this is a perfect example. Because we should have had that. We helped get him to be the Democratic nominee. But unfortunately, we didn't have that same energy in choosing a candidate that represented our interests before we kind of like had him by default. And so do I think he'll make change? I'm always hopeful, but I think we need to learn this lesson, particularly middle class and older Black voters, that we can't keep playing this better of two evils game. You know, history repeats itself. We've done this before. We saw it with Clinton. We saw it with Al Gore. We have to stop playing this game. We should be able to put up candidates that we really believe in instead of just, you know, choosing whatever we're left with after, you know, white folks have made their choice.
Agreed, brother. Agreed, brother. And I think it's important to understand that, well, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote a piece in the 1950s, and it was called I Won't Vote. And in that, he articulated much of what the good brother was just saying, or the fact that there's one political party with two heads. So in discussing Joe Biden, we must discuss that Joe Biden was a segregationist early on in his political career. We must discuss that Joe Biden is the author of the 1994 Clinton crime bill, which disproportionately affected African Americans and mass incarceration. We must discuss his imperial politics under the Obama administration and the fact that that administration deported more immigrants in history than any other presidential administration. And these are all things that are not talked about on the regular in our community, and they're not being discussed. And we've got to, it was said already, but I'll reiterate, we've got to get away from the sentiment of voting blue no matter who. The Democratic Party has long since bought the black vote, and it was very cheap. Mm-hmm. It was very cheap. It was very cheap. And I'm not here to give a history lesson, but it also needs to be understand that there was a point in time where black people saw refuge with the Republican Party, radical Republicans. You know, it was Lincoln that quote unquote freed the slaves, even though that isn't the rhetoric that we should be using. But Lincoln was a Republican. So we have to understand that these parties don't have our best interests. And if we're looking for change, that we should find that on the ground. You know, we constantly have conversations about national politics, and I think that has to deal with the dramatization of that. You know, we watch the debates and everything, but most folks can't name their 5 city council members or who's on their board of education. Those are the people that you can go see. You can call their office and you can hold them accountable. So if you're looking to make real change, you start with your local officials.
Excellent comments. Brother Nevin, anyone else on the panel, or should we move on to the next question?
I have another really good question.
Dr. Mullen?
Is it okay? Really, really quickly. I just want to say, I think it's also important that we envision a new earth, right? I just want to put that out there. I think it's important to really, do we want to do things the way we've always done them? Or what is dismantling truly? What is it when we talk about burning the system down? It means that a lot of us are going to be uncomfortable, maybe including myself. You know, a lot of people that are middle upper class are going to be extremely uncomfortable. So when we talk about solidarity and organizing and who we're voting for, there is a part of me that's a little bit like disconnected and dissociated from it, because I'm hoping for this whole other way. And I do think that, you know, fighting for each other's causes and each other's struggles, internationally, capitalism, imperialism, like doing it across the board, like that is the only way. And looking at the history, looking at what has not worked, as historians know, my brothers, you know, like looking at the history and what hasn't worked. And I just have really strong questions about whether or not the political system and the electoral college and all of that really works for Black, Indigenous, brown people of color. And I'm not convinced. Just wanted to say that.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you guys. So I think this will be the last Q&A question, just in the interest of time, but there's been so much wonderful information shared by our panelists, and also I see in the chat, if anyone is not watching the chat, you need to look there. There's some great links. So this last question is from Coy Nivens, who actually was the woman who spoke up earlier. And she said, will the increase of Black people supporting our own, economically, educationally, etc., empower the community to be able to withstand the pressure of oppression from an economic standpoint?
Excellent question. Anyone on the panel would like to tackle that?
I'll tackle it briefly, just because I'll be brief. And I want to bring it back to something that the brother Isaiah said earlier. It's that there's a misperception that there's not wealth in the Black community, and there is. It's just that when people obtain wealth, they like to do something I called, and it's the house next to Bob complex, right? So when people achieve a level of socioeconomic status that they see fit, their first thought is to leave that marginalized neighborhood and go get the house next to Bob, and then they're not tapped in with their communities more. So we have to make a double down effort on staying where we're at and building our own neighborhoods up and keeping that wealth within the community.
Yeah, I would piggyback off of that and say that, you know, it's important to redefine what we consider to be wealth too, right? So if we're going to decolonize our communities, it starts with decolonizing, you know, the practices of capitalism that may not be in our best interest. And so the way that we share resources doesn't even always have to be money, right? Like we as individuals are resources. We are, you know, we are basins for education. We're change agents. We can provide our own homes. We can provide our own spaces and for those folks who are seeking refuge. And so, you know, the way that we look at distributing wealth doesn't always just have to be through the dollar. And for the money, and when we do talk about the dollar, how we invest that doesn't need to look like what it is that they do on Wall Street, right? And so, I think that's been a flaw that we've grappled with for a while, is that if we do as the master has done, then we think that it'll save us. But the problem is the way that they've done things requires that there's always someone at the bottom. The way that they do things always requires for there to be essentially an inward, right? Like James Baldwin said it himself. And so I don't know if we should just adopt what it is that white folks do to generate wealth, because it seems to not work out for anybody who's non-white, except for the exceptional few.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent, excellent. Anyone else? Okay, well, I'll just end on this note. If I could have just a few seconds to say this, is that so many of the comments made by our panelists, as well as the various comments made by the nearly 125 people who are joining us, speak to this issue of economic empowerment and power sharing. If we are truly to have peace and justice, we must have economic power sharing. Anything else short of that, we will see ourselves in this position again in the very near future. At a certain point, people have to learn to do without. And so when we speak to the issue of reparations, I'm of the thinking that the 21 trillion that we should be demanding is not only doable, but is necessary. And for many, particularly those among my white brothers and sisters, that history of looking at the John Browns of the world, the William Lloyd Garrisons of the world, the Peggy McIntosh of the world, is going to require for them to reevaluate and refocus on that worldview that they have held on to for the last 579 years. And that's a worldview that's hell-bent in being at war with the environment, being at war with people of color throughout the globe, being at war with African Americans in this country, and just being at war, period, even within themselves. This obsession with the military to the tune of nearly $750 billion per year, we have to say to ourselves, is this really necessary? So as we look for the monies that is owed to our ancestors, as we look for the monies that is owed to us, the money is there. People's budgets are a reflection of their values. And if we make it a priority, it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Panelists, Dr. Guzman, can we just give everyone a round of applause? American Sign Language, rounds of applause. Put up those reactions, those thumbs up, those hand claps. We're gonna do what we need to do in this virtual space just to let you know how much we love and appreciate you, your comments, your insight. Everything that you shared was so valuable, and we really appreciate you being here. I'm so grateful for each one of you. You added so much to our experience this evening. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Summer, who will introduce our next performer.
Thanks, Venida. I'm really excited to introduce this performer. She has been in Full Color, and she's also in our poetry zine. It's called In Her Words. So Stephanie Desai is a poet and Black classicist from the Bronx, New York. She is currently pursuing her MFA in poetry at Columbia University. Steph loves to dance around to music and obsess over astrology. Me too, Steph. And in case you are wondering, she is a Libra sun Scorpio moon, and Sagittarius rising. So here today performing Mannequin, I welcome Stephanie Densai.
I can't. Someone, do you mind turning my video on? I can't turn it on myself.
Yes, my bad. I will reveal her to you. And now, behold, Stephanie Densai.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to see all of you. Just a quick backstory on this poem. I wrote this poem in response to an incident that happened July 2018 on my college campus. I went to Smith College. And one of my friends, black woman, was sitting in a house's living room just eating her food, and an employee called campus police on her, saying that she kind of looked out of place. And we've heard this many times before. And she recorded the campus police coming in to interrogate her. She broadcasted and publicized it, and it was published in many popular news journals. And so I just wanted to write this piece because I had been just witnessing so many different articles about Black people just kind of being in spaces and automatically being deemed threats. So I just wanted to write about that. And so it's called Mannequin. And I'm reading from the In Her Words. If you don't already have it, I recommend you get it. Okay, Mannequin. This body is mobile, can move around pretty well, but also this body can be idle. I know how to take up the least or most amount of space possible and the least or most amount of steps or work. Be so swift, so silent you wouldn't know I was near, yet still, white person cannot help themselves, must reach for phone to call police, must transfer the epithet of killer over to cop, must not hold their own white hands accountable, even though they did the dialing and picked up their phone, even though they clearly saw nothing suspicious occurring. White eyes see Black person being mobile or idle, silent or loud, and think Black existence totally suspicious. White eyes see Black person as out of place, up to no good, and have audacity to get offended at mayonnaise jokes as Black catharsis. Meanwhile, white mouth does so much more damage each time that even Black jokes about condiments shrink with fear at real allegations pointed at Black people. Black person finds it a joke that white person fears for their life. It does not understand the direness of calling cops. Black person must be perfectly still, must be inanimate. Mannequin and statue must not be person at all for white person to feel remotely comfortable. Do you see how that goes? How they want the labor from your body, the creativity from your brain, but not for you to stick around? They want the mannequin of you, for you to be stiff and rigid and be made of plastic or marble or metal, but never flesh. They never want to acknowledge that you are breathing, you are being until you stop. Even then, they may let you rot before they speak of you, if they ever do at all. But they do. It's a cycle, remember? White person calls cops on Black person, yet how can you call the cops when Black person doesn't exist until it's convenient? Hi, I'm calling a report an African American. They seem to be out of place. We're sorry. The number you have dialed is out of service due to overuse and eradication. Goodbye. Thank you.
Sorry, this may be a little bit inappropriate, but yes.
Yes, it was awesome.
Yes. Sorry about that, everybody. I had to. I'm sorry, I had to.
It was brilliant, Stephanie. Thank you so much. My IFC in full color sister, I appreciate your words. Very, very powerful, and we will resist being mannequins. So we appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. So we wanted to now introduce someone who's very, very special to our community. And I will be right with you, so. Okay. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Meridia D.L. Warren, Professor Emerita at NJCU, served as Professor and Coordinator of Music Education at New Jersey City University. An active choral director, clinician, mentor, and music coach, she is the founder and director of the Unity Ensemble, a vocal group specializing in the performance of music from the African and African American genres. In July of 2019, Dr. Warren was invited to give a presentation, Creativity and the African American Spiritual, for the World Choral Music Expo Singing Network, held in Lisbon, Portugal. She earned degrees from Columbia University, Howard University, the Kodali certificates from the University of Hartford, and the Kodali Pedagogical Institute in Hungary. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Warren.
Thank you, Venida. It's so wonderful to be with everyone. I normally contribute with the Unity Ensemble. Of course, we could not be together for this event, but there are certain songs in our history that help us to describe the struggle, help us to express our feelings, help us to give us songs that give us encouragement and inspiration. These songs, and just to name a few, Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around, I Woke Up This Morning with My Mind Stayed on Freedom, Oh Freedom, Ain't Gonna Study War No More, and spirituals such as Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child, Nobody Knows the Trouble I See, Precious Lord, Take My Hand. It's not a spiritual, but it was composed by Thomas Dorsey. We Shall Overcome, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Now, I'm not going to play all of these songs, but I'm just giving you a little reflection of the moment.
Dr. Warren, Dr. Warren, Dr. Warren. Thank you. We needed that. Your music brought healing to my soul, and this also was a space for healing, for strategy, for action, and what you played this evening was so uplifting. You should definitely take a look at the chat. We appreciate your presence here, your contributions, and for the wonderful talent that you have that was able to enrich our experience this evening. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We have come to the end of our program, and prior to Dr. Ellis Williams coming, I'd just like to share a few closing remarks. Thank you, thank you, thank you to everyone that came out, who felt the need, the importance to stand together in unity against racism, against the hatred of Black bodies. Thank you for coming together to affirm that Black lives really do matter. I truly needed this, and I'm glad that we were able to come together as a community to support each other and to support the movement. I would encourage you to continue doing something, whether you're in the streets or making masks for protesters or giving out water or writing letters to your politicians, or whether you're watching someone's baby so they can go to participate in some action, whether you're cooking food, whether you are just holding space for people that need the support, whether you're reading books, educating yourself, please, I encourage you, do something. We shared with you resources. We sent them out. We had a host of information in the chat for voting. If you are not registered to vote, please vote. If you are only voting in major elections, I would encourage you to vote in your town council elections, school board elections, anything local. Please be sure to vote. We have information about the census in the chat as well. Let's get involved as citizens and take ownership of our communities. And let's continue to hold each other up. These are difficult times, and we need each other to continue to move forward. And during those times when you need to pull back, remember to take care of yourself and remember that it's okay, because you're not going to be able to continue at a great pace and remain well, right? So we want to be well, we want to take care of each other, but we want to continue to do something to create change and to transform lives. I am so proud of everyone and the work that you've done. Once again, thank you so much for being here. I would now like to introduce one of NJCU's own professor, mentor, someone who's lived the movement, has been in the movement, Dr. Antoinette Ellis Williams, who will close us out with a community prayer. And that will be the close of our program this evening. Thank you all of the panelists, our performers, our planning committee, everyone who participated. Let's continue to engage with each other so that we can continue to have conversations like these. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Venida, for your work, for your tears, for your effort, for how you've organized us and brought us together, for the things we do not know, for the things you cannot speak about, for being tired, but yet you show up, for the barbs that you have to dodge, and for all of those things, we are grateful. A run-on sentence. A season of illness and death, pandemic and protest, and fires and broken glasses and peaceful rage and COVID-19 again, and allies and loss and hope and gain, and police brutality and police solidarity, and unemployment and Zoom and flattening the curves, and essential workers and phases and rallies and chanting and virtual praying and masks and social distancing and toilet paper and Lysol and empty shelves and no meat and no dentist and homeschooling and stress and drive-by parades and celebrations and
not coming home to keep home safe, and eating together and cooking at home, and pizza and takeout and Chromebooks and toys on the floor, and sleeping on couches and artwork in kitchens and fundraisers and graduations without work, and put your button on mute, and walking in parks and arguing about oppression and waiting in food lines and crying for no reason, and confined at home and locked up in prison, and cutting my hair at home and planning for the next season, and afraid to go back to work, and voting and registering and completing the census, and knowing 45 will try to steal the vote, and wondering when will 2020 end, while focusing on hope. May you find peace in the midst of the storm. May you find radical self-love in the stories at the bottom of grandmother's pot liquor and the sounds of partners' uneasy laughter. May sacred rage and consciousness bring way to voice and action while exposing the roots of structural oppression. May those of us in privileged positions find ways to listen while resisting co-opting platforms. May we show up for Black, brown, gay, trans, migrant, undocumented, poor, indigenous, and non-binary persons. May we feel the ground under our feet, sturdy, solid ancestors holding us up, Baldwin and Maya and Ella and Malcolm, Kwame Ture, Toni Morrison, and Fannie Lou. May we have enough language to speak truth to power, enough shade for hot days and safe space. May you have enough artwork and soul music to never forget your magic, enough coins to pay what is due, enough love to know who you are. May your tears nourish dry places deep within your soul and replenish our gardens. May you have health and discernment and courage to walk away when it's time to leave. May you see yourself in every colonized outsider, every brown, Black, trans, cisgender woman and man. May the walls built to oppress us crumble with thunder from voices protesting and resisting in sewing circles and social media dance parties and poetry slams and choir lofts and holy dances and Zoom classes and libraries and art galleries and research studies and in hot yoga and voting booths and citizen review boards and classrooms and Black-owned business and new media, drum circles. May we have enough to be uncomfortable, to make change. May we continue to walk together, to resist together, to build our community together. May we have wisdom and not fall for the okey doke. Where there is fear, I pray for courage. Where there is pain, I pray for righteous bombs. Where there's lack, I pray for plenty. Where there's isolation, I pray for light. Where there is exhaustion, I pray for restoration. Where there's anxiety, I pray for rest. I pray for compassion, for strength, for health, and for safety. Go in peace until we meet again. God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you all and have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.